In preparation of the Allied landings of northern France, aircraft were painted with identification stripes, commonly referred to as invasion stripes or D-Day stripes. These stripes consisted of 3 white and 2 black and were painted initially on the top, bottom and fuselage surfaces of the aircraft, wings and fuselage. With the significance of Operation Overlord, it's a fairly well represented subject for model makers, and manufacturers will take different approaches to these invasion stripes. Sometimes a kit representing this period will include decals for these stripes, and other times they are left for the user to apply themselves. And in this supplemental video, I'm going to be comparing 2 more or less identical kits, but using different techniques to apply these identification markings. So I suppose to begin with, I should introduce the kits. And here they are, a pair of Hawker Typhoon 1Bs from Airfix. The one on the right is from the Airfix Club Kit 2024. There is both an unboxing and build video on the channel, link above for one of those and in the description below. And this one here is the 2019 release, which is no longer available in this particular form, as in not this decal scheme, but the tooling is still available, and I believe there will be one with invasion stripes as part of the current pre-order or current release. The next one which is going to be available, I'm pretty sure one of them has stripes with it as well. Now these kits were made alongside one another, and the only notable difference for me was that the plastic on this one, the club kit, was actually a little bit better in some respects than this one. It's the newer Airfix formula, but other than that they are basically the same kit. They've both been made using the same paints, the same techniques, and the same lack of weathering beyond just an exhaust stain, which you can see there. Not particularly good on that one, but hey, never mind. The only other difference actually is that this one has lost its radio wire, because antenna. It broke, which is because of the better plastic actually on this one. I'm sure of it. It was just much nicer to fit on the club kit. They've also both been equipped with rockets rather than bombs, which I believe is more appropriate for the 6th of June 1944. By all means, if you know better, then please let me know, but I just thought they would both go with rockets. I did also previously make a Typhoon with bombs, and it's nice to do something a little bit different. I suppose ideally I would have had one with bombs, one with rockets, but hey, it is what it is. Part of the reason for the lack of weathering, other than my own personal style, is to highlight that the only difference between these aircraft will be that one has painted stripes and yellow leading edges, and the other one uses decals. So where reasonably possible, these 2 kits should be the best control, because there are no differences. They were made at the same time, using the same materials, same paints. The only difference will be the way that the stripes were applied. They are, of course, also different aircraft, so they've got different registration. However, that's just for me, that's better visual representation. I suppose for a complete control it would be the exact same aircraft twice, but well, both of these have to live in my collection, and having a duplicate seems a little strange, especially when they're made at the same time. So with those caveats in mind, let's now go to stripe application on aircraft number 1. Now, you may wonder why I would start with a shot of the decals for the painted section. Well, it's because of this Tamiya 6mm tape. The instructions were to paint stripes 18 inches on aircraft like this, so each stripe being 18 inches in thickness, I suppose is what you'd say, which when scaled down roughly makes 6mm. A little bit over 6, but close enough that I'm not going to worry about it. And this is one reason why I like painting stripes on this scale, on this type of aircraft. So officially it was single-engined aircraft were 18 inches and larger aircraft were 24, but given that these orders arrived very late in the day and were painted by ground crew with very little equipment, there's a lot of variation, and so 6mm for me feels about right. Yes, it is, I think, overall 1mm too short from total left to right, something like that, one and a bit millimeters, but I think it looks fine personally. So anyway, these are masked off as just 5 stripes each wing, which will then go around the fuselage. So the other option for doing this would be one large bit of tape measured to be the entire size. However, by doing it as 5 individual strips, as you will see later, the entire thing just works a little bit better, more efficiently, shall we say. Although it should appear obvious, the aircraft was primed in white for the fairly simple reason of, the stripes are white, innit? It's white and black. You don't want to prime it in black. The entire aircraft was primed in white. This is actually a difference from the other Typhoon, which you will see shortly. That was primed in grey. But yes, this one, white, tape over white, nice and simple. There is a fair bit of measuring involved, and you saw that I started from the middle. That is because there is a panel line which more or less matches where a stripe should be, so using the model to guide me rather than having to line it up is always going to be easier, and of course it means you can make it more symmetrical. That said, when you flip it over and look at the leading edge, it is slightly wonky. The bottom and top do not quite match. I will address this in due course. Now, this aircraft also has a sky band around the fuselage, and this was where the stripes were painted from. So the sky band already existed on the aircraft, and the stripes were painted adjoining that. This happens to be the same diameter as the rest of the stripes, which is very convenient. It means I can just use 6 bits of tape instead. And again, when talking about a natural border, which is always going to be easier, the Typhoon, or at least the Typhoon 1B, had stitches to hold the tail together due to a weak tail joint in early production examples, which resulted in annoying little things like falling apart mid-air and crash and killing the crew. So the stripe is measured from the join between the tail and rear fuselage sections. So even though this obviously is going to take more effort than doing the decals, at the end of it we have a notably taped up aircraft all the way around the fuselage, top and bottom wings covered in yellow tape, which is 5 for the wings and 6 for the fuselage. The painting can then just be conducted as normal, so airbrush comes out, medium sea grey on the bottom, ocean grey on the top, and then camouflaging, all as you would expect. Obviously, the fuselage being the shape that it is does require a little bit more fiddling. You can't just use a straight bit of tape like you can with the wings, but you kind of get used to what you need to do, and left and right sides are done differently rather than one bit of tape all the way around. You could also do that with the wings, as in tape all the way around. I just choose not to. Next is some Vallejo flat black. The tape representing the black stripes have been taken off, and the black can then just be painted over the top. This is with a bit of a battered brush. That's not a requirement of it. I just picked up the nearest brush I had to me, thought, it will probably do. And yeah, it did, but I probably should have used a better one. The black was also thinned down a little bit just to match the rather smooth airbrush finishing, but exactly the same as on the wings. The fuselage is given a splattering of black. This is deliberately not overly neat, as we shall go into shortly. Panels on both sides of the aircraft needed to be picked out, one in green and on the starboard side in grey, because the registration would already have been there when the stripes were painted, and the stripes were just crudely painted around them, so naturally they wouldn't have gone underneath the letters. It would have been a waste of time given how little time they had. So that has been represented, which is really easy with the Typhoon, and then the white is brush painted over the top as well. In this case, Hataka Insignia white, so not the brightest of whites. And then the entire model is just finished as normal. It's just glossed, then the other decals, and then matte varnished, and that is more or less how I paint on the stripes on an aircraft like this. Now, you may wonder why I choose to paint the white over the top of a white primer. Well, I am not a fan of big, bright white on any model. I feel that it should be dulled down. The scale effect of paint means you're not using exact shades. The light just does not react with them in the same way. You'll often find that paints are deliberately lighter than they would be on real aircraft. And also, by using a small brush and by painting with the white freehand, you do get a slight jagged line, only slightly, on the divide between the white and the black. Now, you think, why would I use tape if I'm just going to freehand it? Well, the tape gives you a rough guide, and the white or tidying up the black afterwards just makes it a little bit scruffier. Don't forget, these things were painted by ground crew with very little notice, and in many cases, not even having access to paintbrushes. So the idea of something dead straight, to me, just does not feel right for what it is meant to represent. And on that note, we come to the second Typhoon, and decaling. This process is rather self-explanatory. It's putting decals on. The model was primed in grey. As I mentioned, that is the only real difference in the construction phase, and rather than obviously missing big white patches for where the prime was and where the stripes are going, it was just camouflaged all the way around. The decals are soaked in water. Water is then put on, and the decal is slid over it. Now, you may see that there are some yellow leading edges on the wing of in between the two cannon. So I was losing my words for a second then. That has to go on this model before the decals for the stripes. The instructions don't tell you that. I just figured it out. A little bit annoying that it didn't say, but hey ho. Also, because of the cannon, there is a hole in this one, and you can see I'm having a little bit of a wrestling match, but trying to be careful not to tear the decal at all, to get it to sit around the wheel undercarriage bay thing. You know what I mean, that bit. But once slid on, which it obviously has to be done from the leading edge because of the cannon hole, it can then be slowly pressed down and all the water soaked up, so a cotton bud came out, and tons of microset and microsol were used to get this to sit right as well. So microset in the blue bottle first, and then once the decals are dry, or at least not going to move again, then microsol in the red bottle. But there was an awful lot of application on this, getting it to fit right. There's a lot of panel lines, because it's quite a large decal, there's a lot of panel lines underneath, there's a lot of detail underneath that you really want to keep. And the fuselage one also has the added bonus of going over those stitches that I mentioned in the previous Typhoon that hold the tail section to the rear fuselage. So the decal has to fit over that, as well as having a separate bit for the top and the bottom two, sort of. The bottom two are supposed to meet up, so it's supposed to end up with these two blankets. I don't know why I call them blankets, like strips of non-stripe. If you've seen the build video of this kit, you'll notice I was not particularly complimentary of it. I'm not as familiar with doing decals for stripes. I find it much harder, especially when they're large and going over complicated bits of detail. This took probably about 2 hours just to get the wing stripes and the fuselage bands on, before I then gloss varnished over the top of this to make sure that they absolutely didn't move before putting the rest of the decals on. And also, as mentioned there, this is also wrong, as the stripes are symmetrical rather than going around the asymmetrical registration as per the one that I painted, although actually that's a symmetrical registration, but you get the idea. That the key thing is that it is wrong, but rather than going into that again, it does prove a point that doing decals for the invasion stripes is only good if the manufacturer has given you good decals. Airfix are usually one of the better ones for it, but they have also provided kits like, for example, the Mosquito, that don't have any invasion stripe decals with them at all. They just make you paint them. So they're a little bit inconsistent as to whether they're going to. When they do, they're usually fine. This is the first time that I've seen one that they really haven't been, but bear in mind I usually paint them. And with that, the rest of the kit is just assembled, and voila, here we have the second Typhoon. I will acknowledge that there is some level of user error, maybe, with the decals of this one, especially around the tail where the sky stripe is. I couldn't quite get it to fit. It's a tiny bit too long, which makes the entire thing just difficult, and as such I think it's a little bit off centre, especially the entire way around, but especially visible at the top and anywhere near the tail, of course. Also, the colour of the sky is notably bluer. Now, the history of RAF Sky could be a video in itself, because there are lots of different interpretations of it that were used at the time. So sometimes it was more blue, sometimes it was greener, whatever. It's got lots of names, lots of different shades. But I painted Hataka Sky on the spinner, which is the colour I'm most familiar with using, but the decals have this kind of bluer shade. Interesting to note that the other Typhoon, the 2019 one, the non-members club one, that has a much closer sky to the paint that I've used on this one than the fuselage band and sky lettering of the club one. So, I don't know. Either way, this is the end result of the decal one after many hours of wrestling with decals. Okay, before I go into the final spiel and my own personal preference, I just want to add a little bit in here saying that this is all personal choice. If you are happy with the result, that you get from decals and you don't trust yourself with painting, that is fine. If you prefer painting, then that is also fine. The only person that needs to be impressed by your model is yourself. Unless, of course, you're making it for somebody else, in which case they should probably also be impressed by it. But still, you get what I'm trying to say. So just because I'm going to have a preference and I'm going to explain why, it doesn't mean that you have to share that. But I would love to know what your opinions are on whether you decal them or paint them in the comments below. So please feel free to drop a comment. Invasion stripes were hastily applied by ground crew with very little notice and very little tools. They were not straight. The Typhoon that I painted has them slightly askew, so the top and bottom wings don't quite match up, and you can tell, only if you're really looking for it. They look neat, but they don't look perfectly straight. That is how I like them. By brush painting them, you get a slight brush texture. I know that scale effect, you wouldn't see it, but it gives it a different texture from the rest of the aircraft. That is how I like it. Decals are too neat, too pristine. If you're representing a modern aircraft, as in a museum piece, then the decals make some sort of sense. But for me personally, the white is too bright, the lines are too straight, and everything is just too damn perfect. And I don't like it. The perhaps best way of representing D-Day stripes, I don't think it would necessarily be applicable on 72nd scale, but definitely a larger scale, would be to just finish the aircraft and then paint the stripes. Just brush them on, mask it and brush them on. So not even the version that I have done here. In 72nd, I think this works fine, but ideally you want those stripes to look like they've been painted on an already finished aircraft. I would even go so far as to say, if you are weathering your aircraft, weather them before putting the stripes on. Then put the stripes on, then add some more weathering, particularly if it goes over guns or cannons like it does here on the Typhoon. For me, decals just simply don't do it. They don't look right. Look at these two, right? Spinning around. Which one do I want to pick up and have a look at the most? The one with the slightly dirtier, grubbier looking stripes. It just, to me, looks better. Now, if you are really opposed to masking, bearing in mind that I hate masking, right? I am opposed to masking. I don't do it unnecessarily. But if you really don't like it, you don't have any tape, or you don't want to buy a tape, or, of course, the stripes are not as easy as just chucking down 6mm tape, then fair enough. If decals are your thing, then put some decals on. I completely get why you would, but you're then really relying on the manufacturer to get it right. And here, Airfix didn't. And I can't think of a single kit off the top of my head where I haven't wanted to throw it against the wall when trying to do the decals. But still, your mileage may vary. I completely understand either one. But yeah, that's just my 10 stripes worth on the subject. So thank you very much for watching. If you don't subscribe, please do. If you liked it, hit the like. And if you want to get the notifications when a video goes live, then just hit the notification bell. You can also become a channel member like the people on screen now, who, for example, got a post showing these two aircraft off ahead of this video being released. So, you know, you could get spoilers like that, and occasionally I might show you something that I've bought, which will maybe feature on the channel in 6 months. So, you know, you could say, yeah, I knew that was coming because I pay a small amount each month for a bearded man to ramble about bits of plastic and decal paper. That's it. I'm going. I have one more video planned as part of this trio of D-Day related content, so keep your eyes peeled for that. It's another anniversary. See if you can guess which one. But until then, goodbye.